Okay. So today's presentation is delivery configuration. We're going to go through some of our holdings and item information and looking at some display logic rules and things like that. And next week we'll be looking at local data. So we'll be talking about actually creating those local fields for display and facet. And we'll also be talking about the normalization rules that you can adjust so that those things display the way you want them to in your discovery interface. So that's next week. We're more than halfway through the session. So yeah. So today is delivery configuration. And in today's session, we're going to go over what the delivery services are in Primo V and how we can configure them. We're going to talk a lot about the discovery interface display logic area in the fulfillment configuration, and that will allow us to customize various aspects of delivery, including what appears in the View It and Get It menus, the general electronic services that are available to your institutions for your users, whether or not you are utilizing direct linking, so the link in the brief results goes directly to the full text content, or if you're clicking into the full record, and also how the links to your related records are presented. We'll also look at the configuration for your holdings and items for your local records. And we'll also look at the ways we can configure the request forms that are native to Alma. So starting with the delivery services. So delivery services in Primo refer to the services that your patrons will actually be using to access their resources. And of course, it depends what you see, depends on what type of inventory you have, and also if you have it available and other things like that coming from your actual environment. There are 3 different methods of delivery. You have your View It, which is for your electronic resources, your Get It for your physical resources, and your How to Get It, which is mostly for things you don't have full text or physical access to. So View It refers to the services that allow your users to access and display your electronic and digital inventory if you have Alma D. The View It menu can contain links to the online content. Obviously, it can use the Alma URL, the open URL, link resolver, or it can have direct links, and maybe those are coming from the CDI record, or they might also be coming from your BIB or local holdings record. The View It can also include database services and any general electronic services that you choose to define that we'll take a look at today. Commonly used document delivery services, ILL services, etc. And if you have Alma D, also the delivery services for digital representations. The Get It refers to the services that allow your users to find and place requests on your physical inventory. The Get It menu, of course, will include holdings information and item information, including where you can find it, availability, real-time availability, and where in the library and is it, what's the location of it. The Get It can also include your requesting options that you may have configured in your fulfillment, your terms of use, like booking requests, digitization requests, purchase requests, resource sharing requests, and of course you can have general electronic services set up there for ILL and other, digitization services for physical materials. Your How to Get It appears only when the record has no inventory attached to it, or if the exact inventory can't be displayed in the brief availability statement. So for example, you might see the check holdings statement if you have a physical journal and the items attached to that physical journal, like the actual issues, you're not sure. Some of them may be checked into the library, some of them might be in a work order status. Maybe some of the issues are checked out if you loan them. So Alma can't get an accurate availability statement in the brief result. So you'll get that check holdings. You'll also get the how to get it. We saw this in the expanded results in your CDI records when you don't actually have access to it. And in that case, often you're going to have, of course, a resource sharing link, a purchase request, or a general electronic service that generally links out to like an ILL. So let's take a look. I'm first going to And we're first going to look at just a few of these types of services just to see what they look like, remind you what they look like in Primo V. So first taking a look at the View It. So I'm looking for a physical, well, I'm looking for an electronic book in my local catalog. Fly, bird, sing. I'm going to sign in also to make sure I have all of my requesting options. Okay. So we're looking at online availability for local materials for this ebook, this local ebook. So I have this Why Birds Sing. We know that this is a local resource coming from the library catalog, and we have our online access section. So this is the View It, and the full text availability is here for electronic material. And of course, these are coming from the U resolver, from the Alma link resolver, but I could also potentially have direct links if this is like a fully local bib. Might be coming from the A56 and the bib. It might be coming from the holdings record to get the link here, or potentially to have a link down here that links out to the record from the actual bib. But this is the View It here in a local record. And then very similar, just in terms of looking at just gonna go birds, looking at a CDI record, going into the article scope, looking at an article, almost the same. I mean, we know that there's a different data source underneath these things. Looking at this microhabitat matters here. This is an article from CDI. The online access, the View It section looks basically identical. And we of course know that the source is different, but nothing really is functionally different about the way that the View It displays for our CDI records. I do also want to show what the digital availability looks like. So this would be specific to if you had a subscription to Alma D and you also were storing your digital representations in Alma. So we do have that set up in the sandbox. So I'm looking for an image in our local, and for whatever reason, it doesn't always take the scope right away. Here we go. So this is an image, this is the image, and then we have the online access. So the View It is pretty much the same, but then here instead of the full text availability, we have the digital version availability. And we link out to the digital version, and this is from the Universal Viewer from Alma. And I can click into this and then obviously link out to the record. And there's something going on, somehow the image is broken for the top level. I think it's supposed to be this bird right here. But it should bring you to that if everything is set up correctly. And then you also have options for the quick access. So this is part of the View It also for Alma D. And if this link wasn't broken, we would see the image of the cardinal right here also in the very bottom. So you would actually preview the image right there. So that's how the View It looks for digital material. And then just quickly going through, let's look for a book, a physical book. For our Get It services, just taking a look at what those look like. So here's the physical material. We know it's physical. And then here we have our Get It. So rather than online access, we have the Get It section here. And then I have my services here. So these are my physical services for this physical item. I have my requesting, digitization, and then this one is a general electronic service. And we'll look at how that's configured and when that applies, when it's shown, under what circumstances. And then here we also have, of course, the holding statement, and we'll take a look at how we can configure that. And then this is the brief item record here. So we see we have this terms of use here. I think there's actually some other fields configured, but of course it will only display if there's actually information in those item fields. So you might not always get, and it looks like there's actually no additional item information. Let me just try another one to show the expanded item information. And you can also configure what displays there. So there's actually two holding statements here. And then so we have options to configure what fields, what labels, and what fields we have in the item record, the full item record here also. So after we've sort of just briefly gone over, oh, you know what? Let me just show one more thing before we move out of this area. Um, so I'm just going to show also, I'm going to search for this journal just to show what the check holding statement looks like. So this is the situation where there are multiple issues for this journal, this physical journal, and some of them are some of them are checked in. So we have these in place, but this one's in transit. It's in some sort of transit status. Maybe it's coming back from a loan, or, maybe it's had some work done to it in a work order. But because these items are different, obviously different issues, and we can't say all of them are in, you'll get this may be available in the holdings, and then you also get this check holding statement in the brief bib, and then also up here in the top of the full record, just because Alma can't say everything's in or everything's out. So you do need to look at the individual status of the items. And I think that that's a pretty popular situation that people have likely encountered. So now that we've looked at all of the different types of services, we're going to look at taking a look at the discovery interface display logic section of the config and how we can affect changes on some of these things. So the first thing we're going to look at are the display logic rules. These allow us to customize the delivery areas of discovery, basically the view it and the get it that we just saw. The view it, of course, includes your open access, your links to your electronic resources. We just saw this, potentially general electronic services like ILL, or representation delivery services, which is what we saw for the Alma D material. And then your get it, you may have booking, you may have request, you may have digitization, those are policies that your library makes, but you may have all or some of these. And it is likely the case that all of these services for your physical and your electronic resources, it's likely that all of these things don't need to display, or you don't intend to display them under all circumstances. So you can use the display logic rules to decide what services to hide, basically under certain circumstances that you might have. So for example, here we see a physical item here. We see it's available, it's on the shelf, we can go find it in the library if we want to find it. And we also have all of these physical services on the item. So we can request it for a hold. So maybe you have, on-shelf holds, digitization requests. So those make sense. If you have those policies, probably those links are good based on the situation. Then you also have resource sharing, you have Iliad, you have OCLC, and you have Relay. And likely in this situation, your library does not intend to show resource sharing services or ILL services for materials that are available and on the shelf. So there are ways that we can use the display logic rules basically to hide these under the circumstance when this is available. And then another example why you might want to use the display logic rules, we have this really long list of electronic services in the view it. And some of them there's multiples even from the same vendor. So we have, obviously this is a popular portfolio or a popular article, and it's contained in many of our electronic collections that we have access to. So we have this through Gale, through ProQuest, and actually through 3 EBSCO collections. And all of these collections also have the same availability statement. So likely these are all bringing us to the same place. And especially in terms of the vendors themselves, the linking level is likely the same. So it's gonna, it's linking to the article. It's probably taking you to exactly the same place. And this is a really long list that might not be super user-friendly to your user who doesn't really care which EBSCO package this comes from. So you can use the display logic rules to decide what to show and kind of pare this list down. So let's look at that in Alma. So we're going to start today with the display logic rules in the discovery interface display area. And you do need to go into the config, and you do need to be able to get into the fulfillment configuration area. So this would require roles beyond just the discovery admin. You would need like a general system administrator role or a fulfillment administrator role in order to get in here and to work with these, or you would need to get together with somebody who has access to the fulfillment config in order to work with this area. And so we're going to be looking at the discovery interface display logic area. And we're going to start by looking at the display logic rules. And so these are the ways that we can hide certain services under certain circumstances. And so taking a look at the first rule here, it's pretty simple. It's hiding from all user groups. It's hiding the service of resource sharing request when the item is available at the institution. And that's true. And you can also use the false value if you wanted to sort of construct them the other way. And you don't have to use availability. You can also use ownership. So if you don't allow the resource sharing request to show, if you own it, even if it's not available to the user, you can make that distinction as well. But this is taking care of our physical, the get it section for our physical items. So when it's available at the institution, we're not showing resource sharing requesting. And you can add multiple services here too also. So you can sort of make these rules more robust. You can add multiple services here. So, you can kind of fit them to your needs. And then very similarly to that first one, this one is taking care of our electronic resources. So we're hiding from all user groups the resource sharing request if we have full text. And we'll take a look at actually creating a rule from scratch in a second, but just kind of showing, I mean, these are really simple, but effective, so basically if there's full text access through some electronic package that you already have, we don't need to show the resource sharing request service because, we have access to the material. So these make sense. And just to note too, before we start looking at creating a rule from scratch, these are applied top down, kind of like the other fulfillment areas of Alma, like your terms of use and things like that. So the rules are applied top down. So you'll want to have your most specific rules up top, and then your more catch-all rules towards the bottom to make sure that everything's being filtered through and caught by the correct rule, because only one will apply. I think that's true. I guess all will apply that are part of this, but I think you need to have them in a logical order, because you can definitely hide multiple services. Let's look at adding a rule. So if you add a rule and you'd previously looked at a rule, it adds what you'd looked at into the form. So you just need to X out of it so that you're starting from scratch again. But you do have the option to select user groups, and you can select multiple. You can use guest users also. So if you wanted to hide like ILL or some service from your unauthenticated users under all circumstances, you can make a rule that defines that as well. But if you leave it blank, it applies to everybody. And so if we wanted to do some work to sort of pare down like this long list, for example, if we wanted to make some rules around that, what we might want to do is do something like hide full text. So we're hiding the full text links. And then you can decide if you want to hide full text links with the electronic collection that equals some electronic collection. Or you can also do this at the interface level. So that's more broad. So you're basically saying anybody that has an interface of EBSCO, which would catch all of those 3 EBSCO links in the previous slide. So hide the full text links from EBSCO if we have full text links from, let's choose Gale. So these are ones that are recently selected. And of course, you can add more. So you can add more values here and here. And of course, you can switch them around. But this will help you sort of pare down that list without having to get really granular in terms of choosing specific electronic collections. Also, you might know from working with certain vendors or interfaces that some packages are maybe more reliable with linking than others. And so you can prefer a more reliable linking interface over something that tends to be more problematic if both exist. So this only applies, in the circumstance where there's full text both from Gale and EBSCO. If there's only EBSCO links, those will appear. So those are kind of some of the rules. You can kind of have an idea of what you're doing with that. In terms of being a little bit more granular, you can also hide full text services with the electronic collection of some value. So for example, if you maybe had a Taylor and Francis education ebooks package, and you also had a very similar Taylor and Francis package that had some overlap in the portfolios. So let's see, ebooks complete. So Taylor and Francis education ebooks versus Taylor and Francis ebooks complete. These are, super similar. They probably have exactly the same linking definitions in the packages. And so if there's a link from both, we don't need to display both links. So that's another way. And this doesn't prioritize one vendor over the other. It's just kind of cleaning up, big packages maybe that you subscribe to from the same vendor, making sure you don't have double links there. So those are some of the things you can do with your general electronic services, or I'm sorry, your display logic rules in terms of paring things down. And then you would obviously make sure that they're ordered correctly. And these should take place as soon as you create them. And you can make them active or inactive. So if you wanted to create something and keep it inactive until you've done some testing, you could do that as well. So let's take a look also at general electronic services. So we talked a little bit about how we can hide certain services, but we'll also take a look at how we can create the general electronic services in Primo. So again, I think probably most commonly people use this for ILL links. And for ILL in particular, you can decide where the links appear in the record. You can also create other kinds of services, like maybe you want to have a link out for searching this item on Amazon, or searching for this in Google Scholar, for example. So linking out to those things. You can do that with the general electronic services. And it looks like, are there some questions I should take a look at before I move on? Try and find the chat box. Let's see. There's a question, can we create a rule based on campus value? Let's see. I don't think so. I don't think you can specify campus here. If anybody knows more about that, you can let me know. I can do some research on it. I'm not sure. It might be the case that you have campus assigned to some of your users, in which case using user groups might be a way that you can kind of at least partially affect that. But I'm not sure that you can do that if you have multi-campus set up by campus. There's a question. What does interface mean here in the discovery logic rules? The interface is defined at the vendor in the vendor record, but it's the interface. It's the like the access model that is being used to access the material. And I think it's easiest maybe to think of it. It's basically like by vendor. So your EBSCO links, your Gale links, etc. There's a question. Please show how other e-collections from an interface if a particular e-collection has full text. Example, hide other EBSCO host if full text in EBSCO host. Oh, so I think I understand. So I think the question asker is asking about hiding EBSCO, other EBSCO links if there is full text from a particular collection. I think you can do that. No. Well, let's see. exists service, full text. Let's see if we can choose electronic collection. Yeah, so you can do that. So you can hide other EBSCO links if there's an electronic collection of, and then you could choose like academic search complete or, some other specific electronic collection there. I hope that answered the question. Okay, I'm going to continue on to make sure I don't run out of time. We'll take a look at general electronic services, and then if we need to circle back at the end, we can do that. So we will take a look now at the general electronic services, so our ILL links, potentially links out to Amazon or some other place. So we're in the same area. We're in fulfillment also under discovery interface display logic, and we're under general electronic services. I think Ray, I think you're unmuted. But these are the general electronic services that we have in this environment. And we'll take a look at the Amazon one first. So this is a really simple one. This is basically just allowing us to search for the item in Amazon's interface. And you could do this also for like Google Scholar. I know I'm not wild about Amazon, but it's, we can set this up also. And so we have this active. When you set this up, you give it a code and then you give it a name. And if you want to have a translation for that name or change the name for what your users see in Discovery, you can give it a public name. And here's also where you can translate those elements. You can also give a public note. So when you hover over the general electronic service, you can have a note display. And when you're creating a new service, it will ask you if this is a document delivery or ILL service. In this case, this is not. This is just a pure search in Amazon. So it's not, but this choosing yes here, if you do have an ILL service, will give you a few extra fields to fill in and some more refinement in terms of like where does the service appear, etc. To set up your electronic service, you do need to know the URL template. And it looks like this, or something like this, and it has these parameters here that are being dynamically filled in based on, based on the record that you're using at the time. And you do need to know this. And there are, let me just see, so the bar is in the way. So please forgive me, I'm just gonna move this down. Let's see, not that. Let's see, am I in the right place? I'm not in the right place. I can find the documentation link, but in the documentation that's linked in the PowerPoint, you can find examples of the URL template. So I know that the Amazon one is there. The Iliad links are there also, so you can just copy and paste them. Some of them require institutional information, like the Iliad ones for sure. There's some things to fill in particular to your institution so that you can use the URL template properly, but you will need to know that. So I do know that there's some linked in the doc, and then I'll show you in a second. There are ways to share your general electronic services to the community and also to copy what others have done, which can be really helpful in terms of getting the URL template and also kind of piggybacking off of other people's work, especially with the ILL type things. So in this case, there's a question, enable without login. We don't need to be logged in to use this. It's just a basic search. We also don't need to disable this service under circumstances when we own it or when it's available, because it's just a search. So it doesn't matter if our guest users are using this service also. But obviously you could see under certain circumstances, you would want to disable the service when, for example, it's owned by the campus or owned by the institution or available. So the second tab here is the service availability rules. And you're basically saying, when does this service appear? And in this case, because we need the ISBN or the ISSN to properly fill out this open URL, we're saying, let's only display this service when ISBN exists in the record so that we can properly fill that out. And let me just show you the community tab because I think this is really useful. So for something like Iliad, so this was contributed by the Southern Connecticut State University, and there's links in the doc as to if you want to contribute your own general electronic service so that people can use your template. I think that's a really good idea if you have something that you've worked on. But for example, if you want to set up Iliad, you can come here and you can copy this from the community tab. And this has, you can take a look at it, but you can see that they have the template in here. You can see what parameters they have, and then they've set up their service availability rules. So if you're struggling or you don't, know exactly what to do with all of that, it might be useful to take a look at the community tab to see if one of your, fellow universities has had a good, you know, a good luck and shared what they've done previously. So that's in the community tab in the main page here. But I will show you also the Iliad links. There are two here. You'll see in the documentation that there is a different open URL template for the articles and journals and for the books and book items, which is why there's two. So the actual template is different. So you're not able to do both kinds of requesting with the same open URL. So let's just look at one of them. But again, you'll fill out, your informational things up here, your code and your name. And then for here, is this a document delivery or ILL service? This one is. And then you get the choice to display it in certain side where it displays. And you can, decide if you want it in the get it, which is for our physical resources, the how to get it when we don't have availability, the view it is our electronic availability. You can display it everywhere. How to get it only, I don't know why you choose none, but so you do have that option. So it does display along with your other services, with the get it rather than just as a link like we saw with the Amazon one. And then again, you need the URL template, which you're either grabbing from your vendor or from the doc. And you see that this one in particular, so we need to have, our particular institution specific information here in order for this to work. And for this one, do we want to enable it without login? No, I mean, we only probably want this for our registered users. Item level, no, I think that this is the most common use, using title level, not using the item level. There is some information about if you want to set this up at the item level. I think there's some additional things you need to choose in terms of what item fields need to be filled out. And then in this case, we've decided to disable this service when the resource is owned by the institution and available. So that's what we've decided here. And then sort of similarly with the service availability rules, because this is for article and journal level only, and there's a separate template for books and book items, we want to make sure that this is only showing for articles and journals. So that's what the availability rules here do. And again, you can check out what others have done in the community in terms of the availability rules to help you set that up initially. So I'm going to move on to the direct linking, also in the same fulfillment area. So if you wanted to set up direct linking, this would basically be the option to click this available online link right here in the brief result and go straight to the resource without having to click into the record. So if you don't have direct linking turned on, when you click this, you'll get into the full record, and then you'll see all the possible services that you can use to get full text. But direct linking allows you just to go straight there, and we'll see what that looks like in various different situations. So the setup for that is in the same area. So we're going back into the fulfillment area here, going under discovery, interface, display logic, and we're looking at direct linking. And so for direct linking, you can decide if you want to use it at also, is it on at your institution at all, or is it off? In this institution, we have this set up where we're only going to have direct linking if there's one service. So we're not, in this case, enabling direct linking when multiple services are available. But if there were multiple services, you could, and you wanted to do it for all of your material that has full text, you could definitely do that. and it will always take the first service in the list. You can also disable direct linking when there is additional information. So if you've entered an authentication note that's displaying to your users or a public note, you might not want to have direct linking because you might want them to go into the full record and actually read that note. So you can disable direct linking when that is available. And then you can also disable direct linking for electronic collections. So this isn't for the portfolios, this is for that top level bib if you have those unsuppressed and you have that level URL that goes directly to the top level database like we saw in the database search. So if you have that and you don't want that to be the direct link, if that's the first link or the only link, you can disable that. You can disable linking for journal material types. And you can also, if you have Alma-D, you can disable direct linking for your digital resources if you want your users to go in and take a look at the viewer. And if you have this set, you can still have direct linking for electronic resources if you have Alma-D. So you can decide on that. So just a few choices there. And I do have this set up in this environment, so let me just show you briefly. I think it's called Song Sparrow. Yes. I'm not sure what material type it is. So I think, yeah, this is it. So because I have direct linking set up and because I know that there's only one service that serves this portfolio or this journal, when I click on available online or online availability, it brings me directly to the resource. And of course, there might be some, proxy server involved here. In this case, this is open access. The link is broken, but we do get to the Bird Protection Quebec website here. So that's what it would look like if you had it turned on. And so I wouldn't be able to do this for anything where there's multiple services because that's not how we have it configured in this environment. Okay, the last piece in the fulfillment area is about related records. So related records, I know we talked about this in terms of the BX suggestions in the CDI record, and they call that related records also, which is confusing. But this related records in the fulfillment area is discussing the succeeding titles, the preceding titles for your journals. And you can display the services for those related records in Primo V if you have them, cataloged that way in Alma. So it's using the 760 through the 780 mark fields to actually define and then display these relationships. And I'm just going to basically show you where you can configure that. A lot of the configuration for this is going to be dependent on what you have cataloged, and there's a nice big doc that explains all of the mark fields and explains all of the options really well. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it is in the same area, in the fulfillment area, and you have different options for the view it for your electronic records and your get it here. And the doc is linked in the PowerPoint, and it goes through all of the different mark fields and subfields, and then it goes through in detail all of these different checkboxes that you can check. But you can pull in those services for your related records based on how you have it cataloged in Primo V. And that's also in the fulfillment area. Okay, so we've gone through the discovery interface display logic area. We're also going to take a little bit of a look at the holdings and item displays and how we can make changes to those. So out of the box, Primo V displays these fields, the summary holdings, the notes, and the supplements. Summary holdings coming from the 866 A and Z, the supplements coming from the 867 A and Z, and the notes coming from the 852Z. That's what's out of the box, but you have basically complete control over what this label is. So this part before the colon, what these labels say, the order of them, and then you can pull in any field and subfield from your holdings record here. So if you have some local fields or if your summary holdings are stored elsewhere, you can make those changes so that it displays properly in your holdings area. Similarly, you can also make configuration options for your the items display. This is the brief items display, and this is what opens automatically before you expand it with the button, or you can use the expand all up here to expand all of your items at once. And out of the box, it displays, I think, the status, the terms of use, and the item's description, if there is a description for that item, on separate display lines. But you have up to 4 lines that you can work with, and each line can contain up to 3 fields, and you can decide on a delimiter to separate those. You also have control over the full item display, so when you do expand it, what are the labels here, and then what information from the item record or from Alma are we pulling in here dynamically? So let's look at that. So everything we just looked at was in the fulfillment menu. This is in the discovery menu. So this you would just need the discovery admin to look at. And today we're looking at this get it configuration right here. And the display for your items and your holdings is the items display information, the holdings display labels, and the holdings display configuration. So I'm going to start with the holdings display labels. And let me find a journal that shows all of the fields. Just so we know what we're looking at. So in the get it here for this physical journal, this one should have, yeah, so this one has the summary holdings, the supplements, and the notes as we've configured it in this environment. And you'll see that there's like a ... here. If I click on view more, it will expand it and it will show me the full, the full information that's coming from the holding. But so we've defined these labels. So these are the labels here. And then here we're defining what field is it pulling this information from your actual holdings record. So this is the holdings display labels and order table. So this is just a labels table. So all you're doing is you are creating these labels that you'll use later. So I think many of these, probably this hasn't been configured in this institution. I bet these are all out of the box, but you have your summary holdings, your supplements, etc. If you have some other holdings display you want to add, you can add a row, you give it a code that you make up that displays here. The description is the label that actually displays to your user, and then you can select one default value, but you don't need to have a default either. So this is just the labels, so you're not actually linking this at this point to any of the holdings fields. And then the second table we're looking at in the discovery get it configuration area is the holdings display configuration table. So this is where we're actually linking the labels that we defined in that last table with the actual field and subfield. So we see that this is out of the box also, the 866 A and Z, the 854 A and Z, etc. But you see that you can make changes here. If there's a different field that represents summary holdings, you can also change the label. So these are all the labels that we had already created. So you can say if this was source of acquisition at my institution, I could display the 866 A and Z with the label source of acquisition. So you can decide which ones are enabled here. You can make edits to them, and you can also add rows. So if there's something else that you need to add here, you can do that. So that's basically the configuration options you have for the holdings display. So you also have options for your items display. So this is the items display table. So we see here we have our brief item display, and I know that the items in here aren't very descriptive. So let me just find a book to show. So hopefully this one has a descriptive item record. Okay. So here we see, well, let me expand. So this is the brief record display. So that's representing the top, the first part of the table, the brief item display, and then we have the full item display here, and that's what displays when we expand this. And you can decide if you want to have a label here and what the label is, and then what pieces of information are actually being pulled in to that display. And so for the brief item display, so only one of them has a label, so I put this label in here. It looks like by default there's no display label, but if you want those, you can definitely put them in. But if we edit a row of the table, you can add fields in here, and these are adding fields from your item record, and some things are being pulled from the terms of use in other places in Alma, but you can add those fields from the item record into this first row or the second row. And if you have more than one field being pulled in, you can also decide on the delimiter if you want. And then you can also have a label if that makes more sense. I mean, I think it does, but you know, apparently by default there's no label, but you can have item status, and then that will display in front of the item status or the queue, and maybe that's more clear, but you do have those options there to make decisions about that. And then similarly for the full display, which do have labels by default for whatever reason, but you can make changes to those. You can make changes to what displays. You can add additional not defined. You can add additional pieces of the item record here if you want that to also display in the full record, if that's useful to your patrons. So those are your configuration options there. And then the last thing to go through is just taking a quick look at the request forms, so the native request forms in Alma. So if you're using like the request for like a hold or a booking request, there are some fields, of course, that your user is asked to fill out. The request in the booking form. You can also have purchasing requests, resource sharing requests, etc. Those are some of the native forms in Alma. And you can make some choices about what fields you need your user to fill in, which are mandatory, you know, if you're showing material type and other things like that. You don't have like full control, like you don't have control, at least as far as I know, over the actual like HTML structure of the form, but you do have some configuration options in terms of what fields actually display. So if we go back into the discovery menu, back into the get it configuration, the top 4 options here are your requesting forms. So your digitization, your hold and booking, your purchase, and your resource sharing request forms can be configured here. And so we'll just take a look, and they're all a little bit different in the menus. So you just want to take a look at them and see what they, you know, see what they look like. But this one, this hold and booking, is really a simple form. It's just, do you want to display these you know, these fields to your user in the form? And some of them are, let me just show you the requesting form. So some of them, like the material type, displays here, and then some of them are going to, you know, create drop downs or other full text or, you know, free text, I should say, areas in the form. So it depends what it is that you're enabling. It might look different in the form, and the request and booking share the same request form. So you're making decisions for both of those when you're making your decisions here. And you can decide if, you know, volume should be displayed, you know, make your choices about that. So it's a pretty simple table. So you would just, you know, configure it and save it. And then let's just look briefly at the resource sharing request form. This one is a little bit more involved, and it allows you to make certain fields mandatory. So you can decide if you want them visible, do you want them to show at all, and then is this mandatory to fill out? And you know, there's different requests. So you have your book request, and then you also have choices for your article request. And so likely you'll want, you know, like issue and volume and chapter potentially to be mandatory for some of these, and maybe it's not as mandatory for the book request, for example, but you can decide which fields you want visible and which you want mandatory in the resource sharing request form. And then you also have some choices about the delivery fields. So, you know, pickup location, not needed after, kind of familiar from the booking form also. And you can set a default. So if the default like form is photocopy, format is photocopy, you can set that. And then the user can change it with the dropdown, but this will be the default. If there is no default, you don't have to have one. It's not required. But you can use that to configure the form, the resource sharing request form. And then once you were set, you would save it, and then you should see those changes reflected in the form. And that is pretty much it. So I'm just going to show that all of the links to the doc are in the PowerPoint, so you can take a look at pretty much all of the pieces that we've seen today. You can take a look, read more about them. And then, of course, if you want any one-on-one help, you can email Premium Services at Ex Libris Group if you want to sit down with somebody for a particular issue that you may be having. And that's it. So let me get back into the chat to see if there's anything that I can show or that is unclear before we sort of wrap up for today. So let me find my chat. I'm going to stop sharing for 1 second just to find that chat window. Okay, here we go. So let's go back a little. Okay, so there's a question, are there more updated guidelines for setting up the Get It Now document delivery? Seems like there are useful configurations to apply with general electronic services configuration, but the current documentation seems old. I'm not sure what you're referring to. I'm not familiar with the Get It Now document delivery. Is that like an ILL type service? It's very possible that the documentation might need to be updated. Oh, thank you. Somebody from the audience says that the developers network helps with getting the templates for the general electronic services as well. That's a great point. Question 11, are there different types of open URL for articles versus books with most ILL services, or is that a unique thing for Iliad? To be honest with you, I don't know. Maybe somebody else on the call has set up TPASA or one of the other ILL services and might know. The developers network also might have good information, but I can ask and answer that later in the chat doc, the Q&A doc. Question 12, in the service availability rule on the default on the bottom, what does that mean exactly? Is it the default value, true or false, before other conditions are applied?
Laura, I've already answered that one.
Oh, thank you. Also, you're here. Hi, Milan.
Hi.
Okay, let's see. There's question 13. Does direct linking work for ebooks as well as articles? Yes. Oh, I see that's answered also. Let's see. Question 15. Can labels be contingent on if-then subfield content? Example, if 852 contains data XXX, then use label Y. Not that I know of. I think it's just if it exists and those subfields exist, then it will display the label and the information from that field. Question 16. We have direct linking set up when there is only one provider available and it works great. However, when we have more than one provider, the full text link in the brief record opens up a new tab with the services listed rather than leading to the view it section of the full record. However, when we have more than one provider, the full text link in the brief record opens a new window with the services listed rather than, Milan, I don't know if you know the answer to that. That's unfamiliar to me.
I was just writing an answer for that.
Okay.
I do believe that that is the expected behavior if you do not enable direct linking, even when there's more than one service available, meaning if you do not set that checkbox, that parameter enable direct linking when multiple sources are available, then when direct linking is enabled, when you click on that availability link, it's going to open up a new tab, and it will open it up with the focus on the view it section. I think that's what they're saying they're seeing. Yeah, view it section of the full record. And I think what they want is instead for it to open up in the same tab, I'm assuming.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
I believe that's the expected behavior when you have direct linking enabled. It will open up the full record in a new tab. Unless you enable that parameter, enable direct linking when multiple services are available, unless you set that checkbox, unless you check that checkbox.
Thanks, Milan. And there's also question 17. We have a problem report link in the links. I want to move this up in the display. Right now it is at the bottom. I have tried using full record services to move links up, but it doesn't change anything. So it sounds like you have a general electronic service that's report a problem, and it displays at the bottom in the links, and you want to move that section up more towards the get it. Um, the full record services, you should be able to move that around. Let me test that, see what I can come up with that, moving the link section up toward from the bottom of the record. Um, Question 18, Get It Now is for CCC collections, Copyright Clearinghouse. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar. I'll ask my colleagues. I'm not specifically familiar with that. Um, Question 18, in my discovery configuration menu, there is no menu option holdings display labels that you mentioned. Ah, yes. There is a parameter that needs to be set. Let me try and find it. I think there's a configuration element to it to allow holdings to be configured at all. Let me find it in the presentation. So if you don't see that, you might need to do one additional piece. Here we go. So you'll need to set that uResolver underscore enable underscore get it underscore holding configuration parameter set to true in order to see that. Question 19, within the get it area, is the terms of use field for selecting a TOU, or is it just the TOU of the item? I think it's just the TOU of the item because I don't anticipate that you would be able to select. Question 20. If you want to move the report problem link up, would setting it as an ILL direct linking work? ILL or document delivery link, even though it's not, be a good idea to make it more visible? Um, I don't know. Milan, have you ever worked with that before? Like if they want to have a GES to display in the get it services and it's not because it's not an ILL service. Do you know how folks deal with that generally?
Unfortunately, I don't. I'd have to look at the specific example and how they have everything set up.
Yeah. If I find out anything or if I'm able to set up an example myself and test it, I'll let you know in the Q&A doc. But otherwise, you might need to open a case with support to help you on that. But it doesn't look like there are any other questions, and we do have 2 minutes left in the hour. So hopefully that was useful, and I will write up answers to the answers that I've given verbally and also copy the answers that Milan has given in the chat and put it in the Q&A doc so that you can reference it later along with the recording. And yeah, so if there's no more questions, thanks everybody. Thanks Milan. Thanks for attending, and we'll see you hopefully next week for local data.